The viewport of the stellar transport Ethelgard was a circle of reinforced hyperglass, cold enough to burn the skin, but Eli Reyes could not pull his forehead away from it. After 6 months of cryo-sleep and 3 weeks of sluggish sub-light maneuvering, the void finally had a face. Draconis 3. It did not look like the promotional hollows back on Earth. The brochures had promised a jewel of the outer rim, a frontier of opportunity. From orbit, it looked less like a jewel and more like a wound in the dark fabric of space, beautiful and bleeding. The oceans were not the comforting blue of home, but a deep, bruised emerald, swirling with heavy particulate currents. The continents were jagged slabs of obsidian and basalt, shattered by tectonic violence, and between the cracks of those black plates, the planet glowed. Veins of magma ran across the night side like an intricate, burning nervous system, pulsing with a slow, geologic heartbeat. Eli adjusted the collar of his stiff corporate tunic. It was gray, functional, and already felt too tight. He was 26 years old, a systems engineer with a specialization in high-pressure geothermal containment, and he had just spent his life savings on a one-way ticket to a rock that looked like it wanted to eat him. The ship-wide intercom crackled, the voice of the captain smoothed by synthetic modulation. Passengers. We have achieved high orbit around Draconis 3. Shuttle boarding for surface transfer to Ashen Gate will commence in 15 minutes. Please ensure all biometric data is synced with the HelioCore immigration grid. Welcome to your new future. Eli exhaled, his breath fogging the glass for a second before the recyclers scrubbed it away. He checked his reflection. Dark hair, tired eyes, pale skin that had not seen real sunlight in years. He looked like exactly what he was, a man running away from a beige cubicle in a beige city on a beige planet. He wanted color. He wanted heat. He grabbed his duffel bag, the only piece of luggage he had brought, and joined the herd of contractors shuffling toward the airlocks. The orbital immigration hub was a sensory assault. It smelled of ozone, recycled coffee, and the metallic tang of thruster fuel. Thousands of beings moved through the vast domed atrium. Most were humans, miners, geologists, heavy loader pilots, clad in the ubiquitous orange and gray of the HelioCore Corporation. But as Eli shuffled through the slow-moving queue, he saw them. The Draconi. They were impossible to miss. They towered over the humans, the shortest of them easily standing 6.5 feet tall. They moved with a fluid, predatory grace that made the humans look like stumbling toddlers. Eli found himself staring at a pair of them standing near a security checkpoint. They wore modern, distinct clothing, high-collared flight jackets and reinforced trousers, but the clothes could not hide what they were. Horns swept back from their brows, some curved like rams, others straight and sharp like daggers. Scales, iridescent and shimmering under the harsh station lights, clustered along their cheekbones, jawlines, and vanished down their necks. Their skin tones ranged from deep volcanic ash to burnished copper and vibrant teal. One of them, a woman with scales the color of oxidized copper, turned her head. Her eyes were slit-pupilled, a piercing electric yellow. She caught Eli staring. Eli immediately looked down at his boots, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He had read the briefings. Of course. He knew Draconis 3 was an inhabited world, that HelioCore had a treaty with the native population. But reading about dragon-descended sapients on a datapad was very different from standing 50 feet away from a woman who looked like she could snap his spine with one hand and then breathe fire on the remains. Next. Please, a mechanical voice droned. Eli stepped up to the automated customs kiosk. A holographic avatar flickered into existence, a smiling, generic human face with dead eyes. "Welcome to Draconis 3, employee 8940. The avatar chirped. "Please confirm your contract details." Eli pressed his thumb against the scanner. "Confirmed. Role: Senior Containment Engineer. Duration: 3 standard years. Housing assignment: Sector Ember 17. Eli frowned slightly. He had applied for the standard corporate dorms in the human district, known for being sterile but efficient. Ember 17 sounded different. "Query," Eli said, his voice raspy from disuse. "Is Ember 17 within the primary corporate zone?" The avatar's smile did not waver. "Sector Ember 17 is a Tier 2 residential ring. It is a designated zone for cultural integration with local populations to foster interspecies cooperation and community building. Your housing credit has been automatically applied. Enjoy your stay." The hologram vanished before Eli could ask what cultural integration actually meant. A green light flashed above the gate, and the barrier slid open. He was through. The descent shuttle was a rattling metal box that smelled of nervous sweat and hydraulic fluid. Eli found a seat near a scratched window, clutching his toolkit on his lap. The woman next to him was chewing a stick of stimulant gum with aggressive precision. She had short-cropped hair dyed a violent shade of purple and wore the insignia of the Data Integrity Unit. "First time?" she asked, not looking at him. Eli nodded, then realized she was staring at the ceiling. "Yes. First time off Earth." "Fresh meat," she said, popping a bubble. "I give you 6 months before you burn out or buy a ticket home. I am Mira. Eli Reyes, Systems Engineer." Mira finally looked at him, her eyes scanning him with cynical amusement. "Engineer, that explains the clean fingernails. Where did they stick you?" "Housing-wise, Sector Ember 17, Eli said. Mira stopped chewing. She let out a low, sharp whistle. "What?" Eli asked, tightening his grip on his bag. "What is wrong with it?" "Nothing is wrong with it." "If you like heat," Mira said, a smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Careful where you live, Reyes. Some neighborhoods are spicy." "What does that mean?" "It means you are going to be the minority," Mira said, turning back to the window as the shuttle hit the atmosphere. The hull began to scream as it cut through the air. Ember 17 is deep in the shared zone. It is where the old Draconi clans hold ground. There is tension there. Heliocore pushes for more drilling. The clans push back, and people in the middle get singed. Just keep your head down, and do not stare at their tails. They hate that. Eli blinked. "They have tails?" The shuttle lurched violently, dropping out of the cloud layer, and the conversation died. Below them, the capital city of Ashen Gate sprawled across a massive plateau nestled between 2 dormant volcanoes. Eli forgot to breathe. It was a city of impossible contrasts. To the west, the Heliocore district rose like a fortress of glass and steel. Sharp angles and blue neon piercing the smog. But the rest of the city was a dream carved from rock. Massive spires of black stone twisted toward the sky, connected by spiderweb bridges that glowed with bioluminescent moss. Rivers of lava had been diverted into controlled canals that ran through the streets, casting a ruddy, hellish glow upward onto the buildings. Steam vented from engineered fissures in the ground, curling around statues of dragons that were hundreds of feet tall, silent stone guardians watching the shuttle descend. It was terrifying. It was magnificent. The shuttle slammed onto the landing pad with a bone-rattling thud. "Welcome to the frying pan," Mira muttered, grabbing her gear. "Try not to melt." Reyes, 2 hours later. Eli stood on the sidewalk in front of a building named Obsidian Terrace, and he was already regretting his life choices. The air in Ashen Gate was heavy, thick with humidity and the smell of sulfur and exotic spices. The temperature was hovering somewhere around 35 degrees Celsius, and the local sun, a bloated red giant, was dipping toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and blood orange. Eli was sweating through his gray tunic. His duffel bag felt like it was filled with lead, and the heavy toolbox was digging a trench into his shoulder. He looked up at his new home. Obsidian Terrace was not a typical apartment block. It was a monolith of sleek, dark stone that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The architecture was fluid, devoid of sharp corners, looking less like it had been built and more like it had been poured from a crucible. Heat radiated from the walls. The building felt alive, like a sleeping beast exhaling warmth into the cooling evening. Eli wiped sweat from his eyes and marched up the wide steps to the entrance. He fished his datapad out of his pocket and held it up to the biometric scanner beside the massive, seamless door. Access denied. The scanner chirped cheerfully in red letters. Eli groaned, "Come on." He wiped the sensor with his sleeve and tried again. "Access denied. Biometric mismatch. Are you kidding me?" Eli muttered. He kicked the base of the door, satisfying nothing but his own frustration. Of course the system glitches. I travel 40 light years to get locked out of my own apartment. He dropped his bags and began furiously tapping at his datapad, trying to pull up the manual override code. He was so focused on the screen, muttering curses about incompetent software developers, that he did not hear the footsteps. They were heavy, deliberate steps, but padded, like a tiger walking on velvet. He also did not notice the temperature spike until a shadow fell over him, blocking out the red sunlight. The massive door to the building slid open with a hiss of pneumatics. Eli looked up, and up, and up. Standing in the doorway was a woman. No, woman felt like too small a word. She was an entity. She stood at least 7 feet tall, her physique a powerful combination of curves and lean, corded muscle. Her skin was a rich, warm bronze, and along her shoulders and collarbones, thick, metallic scales glittered like armor. 2 heavy, curved horns swept back from her forehead, framing a face that was severe, beautiful, and utterly alien. She wore a loose, sleeveless tunic of dark crimson silk that left her scaled arms bare, and simple trousers tucked into heavy boots. But it was her eyes that pinned Eli to the spot. They were molten gold, glowing faintly from within, with vertical slit pupils that widened as she looked down at him. She leaned against the door frame, crossing her arms. Her claws, sharp, black, and distinct, tapped rhythmically against her bicep. "You are fighting a door," she said. Her voice was a low, resonant hum, like a cello bowed across the lower strings. It vibrated in Eli's chest. "And you are losing." Eli stood there, mouth slightly open, datapad dangling from his hand. The heat radiating off her was palpable, a wave of dry, oven-like warmth that washed over him, carrying a scent of wood smoke and cinnamon. The lock," Eli stammered. His brain had seemingly decided to reboot. "It is not reading my print." She tilted her head, a slow, predatory movement. "You are the new tenant for Unit 4B, the human." Eli nodded dumbly. Eli Reyes." "Kaela," she said. She reached out, her hand encompassing the entire scanner panel. A small spark of energy jumped from her claw tip to the sensor. The panel turned green instantly and chirped. "System logic override," the machine said, sounding terrified. Kaela stepped back, gesturing grandly into the lobby. "After you, tiny engineer." Eli flushed a deep scarlet. Tiny. He was 5'10". That was average, respectable, even. But as he grabbed his bags and shimmied past her, careful not to brush against her arm, he felt like a child. "Thank you," he mumbled. "Do not mention it," she said, falling into step beside him. Her stride was long and lazy. "I could hear you cursing from the lobby. You have a very colorful vocabulary for someone who looks like he would apologize to a table if he bumped into it." Eli walked into the lobby and stopped dead. The exterior of the building had been imposing, but the interior was a different world. The lobby was vast, with a ceiling 3 stories high. In the center of the room, a sunken fire pit the size of a swimming pool roared with controlled flames, casting dancing shadows on the walls. And everywhere there were women, Draconi women. To his left, 2 women with emerald green scales were lounging on a heated stone bench, laughing as they tossed a ball of plasma back and forth between their hands. Near the mail terminals, a massive Draconi with scarred iron-gray scales was sharpening a blade that looked like a machete while reading a holographic news feed. By the elevators, an older matriarch with scales like polished pearl was scolding a younger female in a language that sounded like grinding stones and singing birds. There were tails. Mira had been right. Thick, muscular tails swayed behind them, acting as counterbalances, flicking with emotion. Eli stood in the center of the room, clutching his toolbox to his chest like a shield. He looked at Kayla, then back at the lobby, then back at Kayla. "I moved to a new planet for work, and all my neighbors were dragon women," he whispered, the words tumbling out before he could check them. The lobby went silent. The 2 women with the plasma ball stopped playing. The warrior with the machete paused mid-stroke. The matriarch turned her head slowly. Kayla let out a sound that was half laugh, half growl. A puff of smoke escaped her nostrils. "Subtlety is not your strong suit, is it?" Kayla asked, her golden eyes dancing with amusement. One of the emerald-scaled women hopped off the bench. She was shorter than Kayla, maybe 6'5", with a crest of feathers behind her horns. She stalked over to Eli, circling him like a curious cat investigating a new piece of furniture. "He is so squishy," the emerald woman said, poking Eli in the shoulder with a blunt claw. "Look at him. Kayla, no scales, no armor. If he trips, will he break? Do not poke the tenant." "Sorry," Kayla said, swatting the other woman's hand away. "This is Eli. He is a systems engineer. Eli, this is Sari. If your lights flicker, it is because she is trying to rewire her toaster again." "I am optimizing it," Sari protested, flashing a grin full of very sharp teeth. The gray-scaled warrior sheathed her machete and walked over. She moved with the heaviness of a tank. She looked down at Eli with an expression of deep skepticism. "I am Thyra," she grunted. "Do not make loud noises after midnight, and do not cook fish. The smell lingers." I don't eat fish," Eli squeaked. "Good," Thyra said. Then she turned and walked toward the elevators, her tail swaying heavily behind her. The pearl-scaled elder, Yesira, simply nodded to him from across the room. A polite, regal acknowledgement of his existence before returning to her conversation. Kayla looked down at Eli, who was still trying to process the fact that he was the only thing in the room that couldn't breathe fire. "Come, tiny engineer," she said, nudging him toward the elevator bank. "Before Sari decides to see if you are fireproof." "I'm not," Eli said quickly. "Just for the record, highly flammable. Noted," Kayla said. The elevator ride was excruciatingly warm. Eli stood in the corner, trying to make himself as small as possible, while Kayla took up the center of the car. She smelled intense, like a bonfire on a cold night. It was not unpleasant, but it was overwhelming. So, she said, watching the floor numbers tick up. Ember 17. Not the usual choice for HelioCore employees. Did you lose a bet? HR assigned it, Eli said. They said it was for cultural integration? Kayla laughed again. A deep rumble. Ah, cultural integration. That is corporate speak for we ran out of space in the human preservation dome, so we are shoving you in with the locals. She looked at him, her expression softening just a fraction. Obsidian Terrace is a good building, Eli. The walls are thick, the neighbors are loud, but loyal. Just watch your step. We run hot. The elevator doors opened on the 4th floor. Yours is down the hall, to the left, Kayla said, pointing. I am directly above you on the 5th floor. If your ceiling starts to get warm, it means I am meditating. Do not call maintenance. Thanks, Eli said. I think. Kayla winked, a slow, distinct blink of one golden eye. Welcome home, Eli. She let the doors close, leaving him alone in the hallway. Eli's apartment was distinctive. He stepped inside and dropped his bags, the door sealing behind him with a heavy thud. The space was beautiful, in a minimalist, brutalist sort of way. The floors were heated black slate. The walls were a matte gray material that he discovered after leaning against it. Shifted opacity to let in filtered light from the hallway. But the scale was all wrong. The countertops came up to his chest. The chairs were massive, built for wider hips and longer legs. The bed was a nested alcove filled with thermal retention sand and plush furs, clearly sized for someone 7 feet tall. He walked over to the climate control panel. The ambient temperature was set to 28 degrees Celsius. He dialed it down to 20. But the system beeped a warning. Minimum environmental standard reached. Further cooling requires landlord approval. Great, Eli muttered, peeling off his tunic and throwing it onto a chair that was too big for him. I am going to live in a sauna. He spent the next hour unpacking. It didn't take long. He had left his life on Earth behind. The photos of his ex-girlfriend, the trinkets from his parents' house, the awards from university. He had wanted a clean slate. He looked around the alien apartment with its giant furniture and sweltering heat. He had certainly gotten one. Night fell over Ashen Gate. Eli lay in the sand-filled alcove, which was surprisingly comfortable once he stopped trying to make it act like a mattress. He stared at the ceiling. The building was not silent. It hummed. A low-frequency vibration traveled up through the floor, a constant reminder of the geothermal taps running deep beneath the foundation. It was the sound of the planet's power being drawn up through the roots of the city. And then there were the other sounds. From the apartment to his left, he heard a deep, rhythmic rumbling. Snoring? No. It sounded more like an idling engine. From the floor above, he heard heavy thuds, footsteps, and then a sound that stopped his breath. A roar. It wasn't a scream of anger. It was a laugh, a full-throated, resonant, dragon laugh that shook dust from the ventilation grates. He heard muffled voices, the sharp retort of Sari, the deep cello hum of Kaela. Eli pulled the thermal blanket up to his chin, despite the heat. He felt incredibly small, a soft, fleshy thing in a house of iron and fire. It was terrifying. But as he listened to the rumble of the laughter and the hum of the earth, he realized something else. It wasn't the sterile silence of his apartment block on Earth. It wasn't the loneliness of the cryopod. It felt alive. He was just drifting off to sleep when the sky tore open. A crack of thunder, louder than anything he had ever heard on Earth, shattered the night. The building shook. The lights in his apartment flickered and died, plunging him into absolute darkness. Eli scrambled out of the alcove, his heart racing. He fumbled his way to the balcony door and shoved it open, stepping out into the heavy, humid air. The sky above Ashen Gate was on fire. An ion storm had rolled in off the magnetosphere. Sheets of violet and green lightning were cascading across the clouds. Silent and violent, the auroras were whipping into a frenzy, dancing like manic spirits. It was a display of raw, chaotic power that made the corporate skyscrapers in the distance look like toys. Eli gripped the railing, wind whipping his hair into his eyes. Below him, the city was a grid of confused lights as power grids reset, but above him, he heard the sound of wind on leather. Eli looked up. On the balcony directly above his, Kayla stood at the edge. She wasn't cowering. She wasn't checking a fuse box. She was leaning out over the railing, her face turned toward the storm. And she had wings. They were massive, leathery expanses that had been folded tight against her back earlier, hidden beneath her clothes or simply retracted. Eli didn't know the biology yet. But now they were half unfurled, catching the updrafts of the storm. The lightning flashed, reflecting off her bronze scales, turning her into a statue of living metal. Her eyes were glowing, bright gold beacons in the dark. She was smiling at the thunder, a look of fierce primal joy on her face. She looked like a queen surveying a chaotic kingdom. For a moment, Eli forgot the heat. He forgot the awkwardness of the lobby. He forgot the corporate mandate and the danger. He just watched her, captivated by the sheer, unadulterated power of the creature living upstairs. As if sensing his gaze, Kayla looked down. The lightning flashed again, illuminating her face. She didn't mock him this time. She didn't call him tiny. She just held his gaze for a second, her expression unreadable, before looking back at the sky as the thunder rolled again. Eli stepped back into his dark apartment, his hands trembling slightly. He had signed a contract to fix cooling vents and run diagnostic scripts on geothermal turbines. He had signed up for a paycheck and a quiet life away from Earth. He sat on the edge of the oversized alcove, listening to the storm rage outside and the dragon woman laughing at the thunder upstairs. He realized, with a sinking certainty, that he was in way over his head, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure he wanted to be rescued. The geothermal processing plant Alpha 9 was not a building so much as it was a scar reinforced with steel. Eli stood on the gantry walkway, gripping the safety rail with white knuckles. Below him, a kilometer deep into the crust of Draconis 3, the planet was bleeding. The extraction pit was a swirling vortex of orange and blinding white. Magma, pressurized by the weight of the continent above, was being siphoned up through massive crystalline conduits that hummed with a sound Eli felt in his teeth. The air smelled of ozone, burnt metal, and the heavy rotten egg stench of sulfur. It was the smell of money. It was the smell of power. Welcome to the heart of the beast. Reyes, Eli turned. Standing behind him was Director Havel. Havel was a man who looked like he had been pressed flat by gravity. He was short, bald, and wore a pristine white suit that somehow repelled the grime of the plant. He checked a data pad with frantic, twitching fingers. "It is impressive, isn't it?" Havel asked, not looking up. "We are pulling 3 terawatts an hour from this tap alone. Enough to power 3 orbital shipyards." "It is loud," Eli shouted over the roar of the turbines. "Efficiency is rarely quiet," Havel replied. He gestured for Eli to follow him toward the sound-dampened control office. Inside, the silence was sudden and jarring. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of the hellscape below. But the room itself was cool, sterile, and smelled of lemon antiseptic. Havel sat behind a desk made of import-grade mahogany, a ridiculous luxury on a mining world. He gestured for Eli to sit. I reviewed your file. Reyes, good marks from Earth Division. You specialize in containment stability. That is good. We have had some fluctuations in the magnetic containment fields recently. Fluctuations? Eli asked. The magma flow looked stable from the gantry, but at those pressures, a fluctuation was the difference between power generation and a crater the size of a city. Minor tremors, Havel said dismissively. The local geology is temperamental. Your job is to keep the sensors green. We have aggressive quotas to meet this quarter. The shareholders back in the core worlds get nervous when the lights flicker. Eli hesitated. He had read the planetary surveys on the flight over. Draconis 3 is barely stable as it is. If we pull too hard on the mantle, we do not pull. Havel interrupted, his voice dropping to a frosty monotone. We harvest, and we do it according to protocol. Havel leaned forward, his eyes devoid of warmth. Listen to me, Reyes, you are new. You are going to hear things. The locals, the Draconi, they have a lot of superstitions about the land. They think the planet has a spirit. They think the magma is the blood of their ancestors. It makes for charming folklore, but it is bad for business. I understand, Eli said, though he wasn't sure he did. Do you? Havel asked. Because I need engineers who fix pipes, not engineers who fix society. We maintain infrastructure, not opinions. Keep your head down. Do your job, and your bank account will look very healthy in 3 years. Get involved in local politics, and you will find this is a very dangerous planet to be unemployed on. The threat hung in the cool air, precise and heavy. Understood, Director, Eli said. Good. Havel smiled, a thin stretching of lips. Now get out there. Vent 4 is running hot. Make it cold. By the time Eli got back to Obsidian Terrace that evening, his head was pounding. The transition from the sterile cold of the office to the furnace heat of the extraction floor, and then back to the humid smog of the city, had left him drained. He walked into the lobby hoping for a quiet trek to the elevator. Instead, he walked into a war zone. The lobby was packed. It seemed every resident of the building was there, forming a semicircle around the sunken fire pit. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and agitated pheromones. In the center of the room stood a man in a Heliocore liaison uniform. He was sweating profusely, clutching a briefcase to his chest like a shield. Looming over him were 3 Draconi women, including Thyra, the scar-faced warrior Eli had met the day before. But it was Kayla who was speaking. She stood with her arms crossed, her tail lashing slowly back and forth behind her, the tip twitching with irritation. She wore a simple robe of gray silk that shimmered against her bronze scales. She looked regal, calm, and terrifying. Let me clarify the request, Kayla said, her voice smooth and low, carrying effortlessly over the muttering crowd. We are not asking for a luxury upgrade, Mr. Henderson. We are asking for the water heaters to function at a standard biological baseline. The liaison, Henderson, wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. Ms. Vareth, please. The corporate energy mandate limits residential water heating to 45 degrees Celsius. That is standard for all housing units. 45 degrees is lukewarm soup. Thyra snarled, smoke curling from her nostrils. It freezes on my scales. It is standard for human housing units, Kaela corrected, her golden eyes narrowing. For a Draconi, prolonged exposure to temperatures below 50 degrees causes scale rot and joint stiffness. You are essentially asking us to bathe in ice water to save the company a fraction of a credit per unit. It is a sector-wide policy, Henderson squeaked. I cannot just change the firmware. You can, Kaela said. She took a step forward. Henderson took 2 steps back. Or we can file a formal grievance with the Interspecies Housing Authority citing deliberate biological negligence. I imagine the legal fees for that hearing would cost significantly more than the electricity required to heat our water. Henderson paled. He looked around the room, his eyes landing on Eli. You! Henderson pointed a shaking finger. You are a human. Tell them 45 degrees is perfectly adequate. The room fell silent. 50 pairs of slit-pupiled eyes turned toward Eli. Thyra looked ready to eat him. Kayla just watched him, an eyebrow raised, waiting. Eli froze. He was holding his toolbox. He was tired. He just wanted to go to sleep. He remembered Havel's voice from that morning. We maintain infrastructure, not opinions. He looked at Henderson, sweating in his cheap suit. He looked at Kayla, whose golden gaze was sharp and assessing. Eli cleared his throat. Actually, Eli said, his voice cracking slightly before he steadied it. Actually, 45 is the minimum safety standard for human skin, but this building wasn't built for humans. The plumbing infrastructure here is rated for industrial thermal loads. He walked over to the wall panel and tapped it. I checked the schematics yesterday. The heaters are throttled by a software lock, not hardware limitations. If you keep the temperature this low for the Draconi, the condensation in the pipes will likely cause corrosion within 6 months. Then you will have to replace the entire plumbing stack. That is, what, 200,000 credits? Eli looked at Henderson. It seems cheaper to just unlock the temperature, does it not? Purely from a maintenance standpoint. Henderson gaped at him. The Draconi murmured approval. Thyra grunted, which Eli assumed was a compliment. Kayla smiled. It was a small, dangerous smile. You heard the engineer, Mr. Henderson, Kayla said. Unlock the temperature, or explain the corrosion costs to your superiors. Henderson defeated slumped shoulders. Fine. I will submit the override token tonight. Just stop staring at me. As the liaison scurried out the door, the lobby erupted in low roars of approval. Kayla turned to Eli. The crowd parted around them. That was unexpected, she said. I didn't do it for you, Eli lied, shifting his toolbox. I just hate bad plumbing. Kayla chuckled, the sound vibrating in the floor. Most humans in this building request a transfer to the domes within a week. The heat is too much. The noise is too much. We are too much. Eli looked up at her. He was sweating again, the lobby temperature climbing as the residents relaxed. I am not sure I will last a week either, Eli admitted. But I unpacked my books, and I hate moving, so I am trying. Kayla studied him for a long moment. Then, she reached out and briefly, gently tapped a claw against the center of his chest. Try harder, tiny engineer. You might surprise yourself. She turned and walked toward the stairs, her tail swaying in a hypnotic rhythm. Eli stood there for a moment, feeling the ghost of her touch on his sternum, before realizing he was smiling. The next 2 weeks were a lesson in humility and heat stroke. Living in Obsidian Terrace was like living inside a living organism that didn't quite understand human biology. It started with the kitchen. Eli woke up early on a Tuesday, craving coffee. He went to the sleek, obsidian kitchenette and pressed his hand against the activation panel of the water dispenser. Nothing happened. He pressed harder. Nothing. He grabbed the manual. Sensors activate upon detecting thermal signature of 35 degrees or higher. His hands were cold. To the apartment. He was indistinguishable from a piece of furniture. Come on, Eli muttered. He rubbed his hands together furiously. He blew on them. He pressed the panel again. Nothing. He ended up doing 20 jumping jacks in his underwear in the middle of the kitchen until his blood was pumping enough to trick the sensor into giving him a cup of water. 2 days later, he was in the communal laundry room in the basement. He had thrown his work tunics, cheap earth synthetic blends, into the dryer unit. He was sitting on a bench, reading a data pad, when Thyra walked in. She was carrying a basket of heavy leather straps and chainmail. She dumped them into a machine and set the dial to purge. "You use the low setting?" Thyra asked, pointing a claw at Eli's machine. "I use the medium setting," Eli said. Thyra snorted. "Medium here is incinerate on Earth." Eli scrambled to the machine and yanked the door open. A ball of gray, molten plastic sludge fell out onto the floor. Smoking. His uniforms. "Ah," Eli said, staring at the goo. Thyra let out a barking laugh and slapped him on the back, nearly sending him face first into the melted plastic. "You learn, human, you learn." But it wasn't just the struggles. There were moments of wonder, too. One evening, coming home late, Eli was walking down the fourth-floor hallway. The air was filled with the sounds of family life, cooking, arguing, music that sounded like drums and flutes. Suddenly, a door flew open and two small blurs shot out. They were Draconite children, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Their scales were bright and unblemished, one sapphire blue, the other ruby red. They weren't running, they were hovering. Their small wings were flapping furiously, lifting them a foot off the ground as they chased a floating drone toy. They zipped past Eli, the wind from their wings ruffling his hair. "Sorry, Mr. Human," the blue one shouted, giggling. "Watch out for the ceiling," Eli called back instinctively. The red one did a clumsy barrel roll, bumped into the wall, shook it off, and kept flying. Eli watched them go, a strange warmth spreading in his chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. On Earth, kids played in VR pods, silent and still. Here, they flew in the hallways. The real shift happened on a Friday night. Eli was deep asleep in his sand alcove when a siren shrieked. It wasn't the wavering tone of a security alert. It was the sharp staccato blast of the fire alarm. He was out of bed in seconds, grabbing his emergency kit. He ran into the hallway. The strobe lights were flashing red. "Is it real?" he shouted. "Sorry." The green-scaled neighbor poked her head out of her door. She looked annoyed. "No. The smoke sensors in Unit 5C are too sensitive." Old Margoth burned her incense again. Before Eli could relax, the ceiling hissed. The fire suppression system in Obsidian Terrace did not use water, which would evaporate too quickly in a dragon fire. It used a chemical drench foam, followed by high-pressure coolant, with a sound like a cracking whip. The nozzles opened. 30 seconds later, the entire population of the building was standing in the lobby. They were drenched. The coolant fluid was freezing cold, a shock to everyone's system. Eli stood near the mailboxes, shivering violently. His pajamas were soaked through, clinging to his skin. His teeth were chattering so hard his jaw ached. The Draconi didn't look much better. Their scales, usually matte and warm, were slick and shimmering under the lobby lights. They looked disgruntled, shaking the fluid off their wings like wet dogs. Here. A heavy weight settled over Eli's shoulders. He looked up. Kayla was standing behind him. She was wet too, her bronze scales gleaming dark gold, her hair plastered to her neck and horns. But she was holding a massive, thick towel that radiated intense heat. She wrapped it around him, pulling the ends tight. "You are turning blue," Kayla said. "It is not a good color on you." Eli burrowed into the towel. It felt like it had just come out of an oven. It smelled like her, smoke and cinnamon. "Thank you," he chattered. Kayla leaned against the wall next to him, ignoring the puddles forming around her boots. "My mother used to say that cold water builds character," she mused. "I think it just builds resentment." "Your mother sounds intense," Eli said, the warmth slowly returning to his limbs. Kayla let out a short, sharp laugh. Intense, yes. That is one word for Lady Verith, clan matriarch, keeper of the obsidian flame, and currently the biggest headache for your bosses at Helio Core. Eli froze. Lady Verith? The one leading the protests against the expansion? The very same, Kayla said. She looked down at him, her expression guarded. And I am her disappointment, the daughter who left the clan stronghold to live in the city. The reformist embarrassment who thinks we can negotiate with humans instead of just burning them. She looked tired, for the first time. Eli saw the weight she was carrying, the way her shoulders slumped slightly, the tightness around her eyes. That is why you were at the meeting, Eli said softly. You are trying to bridge the gap. I am trying to stop a war. Eli, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. My mother thinks the corporation is a dragon that needs to be slain. The corporation thinks we are pests to be exterminated. And I am just trying to make sure the water heaters work so everyone doesn't wake up angry. She looked at him, and the mask slipped. She looked vulnerable. It is a lonely job, she admitted. Eli adjusted the towel, stepping a half-inch closer to her. The heat radiating off her side was better than any heater. Well, he said, you got the water heaters fixed. That is a start. Kayla looked at him, surprised. Then, a slow smile spread across her face. Yes, it is. She reached out and squeezed his shoulder through the towel. Her hand was heavy, hot, and reassuring. Go upstairs, tiny engineer. Before you freeze solid, work became a nightmare of red tape and red warnings. 3 days after the alarm incident, Eli was running a routine diagnostic on the vent output logs. He was looking for efficiency leaks. What he found was much worse. He sat in his cubicle, staring at the holographic display. The flow rate sensors on Sector 4, the area bordering the largest Draconized settlement, were reading 20% above the safety maximum. But the pressure sensors were reading normal. That was physically impossible. If the flow was that high, the pressure should be spiking. Unless someone had recalibrated the pressure sensors to report false negatives. Eli felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Over-extraction caused tectonic instability. If they were pulling that much magma out without balancing the pressure, the ground above the tap would eventually collapse. He printed the logs and marched straight to Havel's office. He didn't wait to be announced. He walked in and slapped the datapad on the mahogany desk. Sector 4 is going to collapse, Eli said. Havel didn't flinch. He slowly finished typing a sentence, then looked up. Good morning to you too. Reyes, look at the flow rates, Eli insisted. The pressure sensors are rigged. We are over-extracting by 20%. If a tremor hits that sector, the whole crust shelf will liquefy. There are people living on top of that. Havel picked up the datapad. He glanced at it for 2 seconds, then set it back down. It is a calibration error, Havel said smoothly. The sensors in Sector 4 are old. They drift. They don't drift by 20%, Eli argued. And they don't drift in a way that perfectly hides an illegal extraction boost. Havel stood up. He walked around the desk and stood in front of Eli. He was a foot shorter than Eli, but he felt massive. Reyes, I told you on day 1, we maintain infrastructure. This is infrastructure, Eli shouted. It is broken infrastructure. Havel's face went hard. Correct the data. Reyes, what? The data is wrong, Havel said, his voice dropping to a hiss. The sensors are faulty. Therefore, the data is confusing the system. Go back to your terminal. Apply the standard variance filter. Correct the data so it matches the pressure readings. You want me to falsify the logs? I want you to do your job. Havel stepped closer. invading Eli's personal space. Or I can find an engineer who understands that calibration is a flexible art. And you can explain to the immigration authority why your contract was terminated for incompetence. Eli stared at him. He saw the cold calculation in Havel's eyes. This wasn't a request. It was an ultimatum. I will check the sensors again, Eli said, his voice hollow. Do that, Havel said, sitting back down. And close the door on your way out. That night, Eli couldn't go back to his apartment. The silence was too loud. He took the elevator up to the roof of Obsidian Terrace. It was a communal space, a flat expanse of black stone with fire pits and seating areas overlooking the glowing city. It was empty, except for one figure standing near the edge. Kayla. Eli walked over. The wind up here was fierce, whipping his jacket around him. It was cold, biting. Kayla turned as he approached. She was holding a steaming cup of something that smelled like spiced wine. You look like you have seen a ghost, she said. Worse, Eli said. I saw a director. He leaned against the railing beside her. Below them, Ashen Gate was a sprawling map of light. The lava canals glowed like open veins. Can I trust you? Eli asked. Kayla turned fully toward him. Her face was serious, the teasing edge gone. With your life? Maybe not yet. With your secrets? Yes, Eli told her. He told her about the flow rates, the rigged sensors, and Havel's order to correct the data. As he spoke, Kayla's expression shifted. The warmth drained from her face, replaced by a stony, terrifying stillness. Her eyes began to glow brighter, the gold intensifying until it was almost painful to look at. Sector 4, she whispered. That is near the jagged ridges. The Ironscale clan has a mining settlement there. She gripped the stone railing. Her claws dug in, gouging deep grooves into the rock with a sound like grinding bone. We have had collapses. Eli, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. 3 in the last month, sinkholes opening up and swallowing homes. The corporation called them natural quakes. They said the magnetosphere was causing crustal shifts. It is not the magnetosphere, Eli said, feeling sick. We are sucking the ground out from under you. Kayla closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, and a small plume of flame escaped her lips, dissipating in the cold wind. They are killing us, she said softly, and they are making you help them. I am not going to help them, Eli said fiercely. I didn't apply the filter. I saved the raw logs to my personal drive. Kayla opened her eyes. She looked at him, really looked at him, with a mixture of shock and something softer. That is dangerous, Eli. If they find out, I don't care, Eli said. He realized with a start that he meant it. He looked at her the way the wind caught her dark hair, the strength in her jaw, the sorrow in her eyes. I don't care. The wind howled around them, freezing cold. You are shivering, Kayla said. She stepped closer. She didn't offer a towel this time. She offered herself. She moved until she was inches away from him, blocking the wind with her body. The heat radiating from her was immense. It washed over Eli, soaking into his frozen clothes, thawing his skin. He looked up at her. She was so tall. He had to crane his neck. He could hear her heart. It wasn't a rapid thump-thump like a human's. It was a slow, deep, powerful rhythm. Thrum, thrum, thrum. It sounded like a heavy drum beaten in a deep cavern. It sounded like thunder. Why are you doing this? She asked softly. You are human. This is not your fight. I live here, Eli whispered. He felt drawn to her, like a moth to a flame, but without the fear of burning. The heat was intoxicating. Kayla looked down at him. Her eyes searched his face, looking for deception, finding none. Her expression softened, the anger momentarily eclipsed by something tender. "Soft human heart," she murmured, lifting a hand to brush a stray hair from his forehead. Her claw tip grazed his skin, impossibly gentle. "You still believe in ethics. It will get you killed, little engineer." Eli didn't pull away. Better than living as a coward. Kayla's breath hitched. She leaned down. Eli rose on his toes. The space between them vanished. The air crackled with static and heat. Eli could smell the smoke on her skin, taste the spices on her breath. He closed his eyes, his heart hammering against his ribs, ready to fall into the fire. Beep, beep, beep. The sound was shrill and horrific. It wasn't a fire alarm. It was the planetary emergency frequency. It blasted from every datapad and public speaker in the city. Eli and Kayla sprang apart. Kayla pulled a device from her belt. A holographic projection sprang up, floating in the cold air between them. A news anchor, pale and shaken, was speaking. Confirmed reports of a catastrophic seismic event in Sector 4. The primary shelf supporting the iron-scale settlement of Carthus has suffered a total structural collapse. Initial estimates indicate. The image switched to an aerial view, where a town had been. There was now just dust. A massive crater, hundreds of meters wide, had swallowed the earth. Smoke was rising from the ruin. Eli stared at the hologram, horror cold in his veins. On Sector 4, he looked at Kayla. The tenderness was gone. The vulnerability was incinerated. Her face was a mask of absolute terrifying fury. Her eyes were burning with a light that wasn't electrical. It was biological. Primal fire. Her lips pulled back to reveal teeth that were designed to tear meat from bone. "Kayla." Eli started, reaching out. She slapped his hand away. The impact stung, but the look she gave him hurt far more. "This is not a storm that passes, little engineer," she hissed, her voice vibrating with a growl that shook the rooftop. "This is not a mistake." She pointed at the hologram, at the dust cloud that used to be a village. "This is something your company is making." She turned and unfurled her wings. With a single powerful downstroke that knocked Eli backward, she launched herself into the night sky, screaming a roar of grief that echoed across the city, flying toward the smoke on the horizon. Eli stood alone on the roof, the cold wind biting into him again, watching the fire fly away. The morning sun did not rise over Ashen Gate so much as it bruised the sky. The atmosphere was choked with a suspension of fine, gray dust that had drifted on the trade winds from Sector 4, turning the sunrise into a sickly hematoma purple. The city was screaming. It was not a single sound, but a cacophony that vibrated through the glass of the high-rises and the basalt of the foundations. Below the sleek corporate spires, the streets were choked with bodies. Draconi from every clan had poured into the capital, their scales painted with the white ash of mourning. They clogged the major thoroughfares, a river of bronze, emerald, and iron, chanting low, resonant songs that sounded like the earth itself was grinding its teeth. Eli stood on his balcony watching the chaos below. Holographic billboards, usually displaying cheerful advertisements for synthetic beverages or off-world vacations, now looped footage of the disaster. The crater in Sector 4, the smoke, the shattered remains of the settlement called Carthus. Across the bottom of the screens, the official HelioCore statement scrolled in soothing blue text. Unforeseen tectonic anomaly. Natural geological shift. Humanitarian aid is being deployed. Lies, Eli whispered. He turned back to his apartment. The sanctuary of Obsidian Terrace had fractured. The warm, communal hum of the building had been replaced by a tense, brittle silence. Earlier that morning, A notification had pinged on his datapad. It was a generic message sent to every human resident in the building. Due to rising civil unrest, HelioCorp advises all non-native personnel to consider temporary relocation to the secure zone domes. Shuttle transport is free for employees. It was a polite eviction notice. It was a warning that the company no longer considered the integrated zone safe. Or perhaps, they just wanted their people out of the way before they did something drastic. Eli grabbed his jacket. He had no intention of moving to the domes. He stepped into the hallway. The air was thick. 2 doors down, he saw a human family packing suitcases, their eyes darting nervously toward the end of the hall where Thyra stood. The warrior woman was just leaning against the wall, sharpening a dagger, but her gaze was heavy, unblinking, and devoid of the grudging friendliness she had shown days ago. When she saw Eli, she didn't nod, she just stared, her slit pupils narrowing to hairline cracks. The message was clear. "Which side are you on?" Eli kept his head down and made for the elevators. He pressed the call button, his heart thumping a jagged rhythm. When the doors slid open, he froze. Kayla was inside. She looked exhausted. Her bronze scales were dull, lacking their usual iridescent sheen. She wore a dark cloak with the hood pulled up, hiding her horns. But there was no mistaking the sheer presence of her. She took up half the car. Eli stepped in. The doors closed, sealing them in a box of recycled air and suffocating tension. Kayla didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead at the brushed metal doors. "I thought you would be in the domes by now," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of the cello warmth he had grown used to. "I am not going to the domes," Eli said. "Most of your kind are," she countered. "I saw the suitcases, rats fleeing a sinking ship. I am not a rat, Kayla." She turned her head slowly to look at him. Her eyes were hard, the gold burning with a cold, distant fire. "Are you not? You work for them. You take their credits. You fix their machines that eat our world. And when the fire comes, you have a safe glass dome to hide in. We do not have domes. Eli, we just have the ground. And now that is swallowing us." "That isn't fair," Eli snapped, the frustration of the last 48 hours boiling over. He turned to face her, ignoring the instinct that told him it was dangerous to confront a grieving dragon. "I am the one who told you about the sensor logs. I am the one risking my career and probably my neck to get the proof. I am not your enemy. You are a tourist." Kayla's voice rose, filling the small space. A sudden flare of heat radiated from her, making Eli sweat instantly. "You came here to escape a boring life. You treat our tragedy like an adventure. You get to feel brave. Eli, but if it gets too hot, you can always just get on a ship and leave." "We cannot leave. We are the planet." "I am not leaving," Eli shouted back. He stepped into her space. It was a reckless move. She towered over him, radiating enough heat to singe his eyebrows. But he didn't back down. "I am terrified, Kayla. I have never been this scared in my life, but I am still here. I am standing right next to you. Doesn't that count for anything?" Kayla stared down at him. Her chest heaved with heavy breaths, her nostrils flaring as she smelled the fear and the anger on him. The air between them crackled. It was a volatile mix of political rage and something else, something sharp and magnetic that had been pulling them together since the first time she opened the front door. For a second, Eli thought she might strike him or kiss him. He wasn't sure which would destroy him faster. The elevator chimed. Ground floor. Kayla flinched, the spell breaking. She pulled her hood tighter, stepping back into her armor of indifference. "If you stay, Eli, make sure it is for the right reasons," she said quietly. Because the middle ground is gone. The next time we meet, you will have to choose where you stand. She strode out into the lobby, leaving him gasping for air in the empty elevator. Eli spent the day at the plant in a state of paranoia. Every time a security drone buzzed past his workstation, his muscles locked up. Every time Director Havel walked across the gantry, Eli expected to be summoned and arrested. He kept his head down, pretending to run routine diagnostics, but his mind was racing. He needed to get the data off his personal drive and into the hands of someone who could use it. But who? The local media was owned by HelioCorp. The planetary governor was a corporate appointee. Lunch hour arrived. Eli took his tray to the far corner of the cafeteria, sitting with his back to the wall. Is this seat taken, or are you just brooding for effect? Eli looked up. Mira stood there, holding a tray of gray protein mash. She didn't wait for an answer, dropping into the chair opposite him. She looked tired, her purple hair slightly faded, the dark circles under her eyes prominent. Mira, Eli said, relieved to see a familiar face that wasn't looking at him with hatred. I haven't seen you since the flight. I have been busy, Mira said. She took a bite of the mash and grimaced. Data integrity is a nightmare right now. We are scrubbing terabytes of sensitive material from the public nets. Apparently, footage of a village falling into a hole is bad for stock prices. Eli went still. You work in data integrity? Mira paused, her spoon halfway to her mouth. She looked at Eli, her eyes sharp and intelligent. Yes, I do. Which is why I am sitting here risking a very uncomfortable performance review to tell you that you are an idiot. Excuse me? Your query. Mira dropped her voice to a whisper, leaning across the table. The one you ran 3 days ago. Geothermal flow variance versus Sector 4 seismic baselines. Eli felt the blood drain from his face. I flagged it, Mira said. You reported me? I flagged it as a user error, Mira corrected. I put a hold on the automated security alert and buried it in a pile of low-priority glitches. If I hadn't, security would have been kicking down your door 10 minutes after you hit enter. Eli stared at her. Why? Because I like you. Reyes, you have a terrible poker face. You are the world's worst undercover rebel. And also... Mira sighed, looking down at her food. I signed up to scrub code, not to cover up mass graves. She pulled a small data chip from her sleeve and slid it under Eli's tray. This is a clean encryption key. If you are going to poke around in the archive again, use this. It will mask your terminal signature. But Eli, stop asking questions the system doesn't want to answer. I can only bury so much. She stood up, grabbing her tray. Next time you want to play hero, try not to leave a digital trail a mile wide. She walked away before he could say thank you. Eli palmed the chip, his hand shaking. He wasn't alone. Nightfall brought no relief from the heat. The air in Ashen Gate was stifling, the ventilation systems clogged with dust. Eli was in his apartment, pacing. The walls felt like they were closing in. He had the data. He had the encryption key, but he was paralyzed by the scale of what was happening. A chime at his door made him jump. He checked the monitor. It was blank, no video feed. He hesitated, then walked to the door. Who is it? Open the door. Eli. It was Kayla. Eli unlocked it. She slid inside quickly, closing the door behind her. She wasn't wearing the cloak anymore. She was dressed in dark, form-fitting leather gear that looked like flight armor, reinforced at the joints. Grab your coat, she said. Where are we going? Somewhere the cameras cannot see, she replied. You said you wanted to help. You said you were standing with me. Tonight, you get to prove it. She led him not to the roof, but down. They took the service elevator to the sub-basement, past the laundry rooms and the maintenance exchangers. Kayla led him to a heavy blast door marked, "Warning, Geothermal Exclusion Zone. Do not enter." She slashed her claws across the control panel, not hacking it, but physically severing the lock mechanism. She hauled the heavy door open with a grunt of effort. Beyond it lay a tunnel. It wasn't a concrete service tunnel. It was a tube of cooled lava, smooth and glassy, winding down into the deep earth. The air that rushed up was hot enough to make Eli gasp, smelling of ancient stone and fire. "Follow me," Kayla said, "and watch your footing." They descended for what felt like miles. The city noise faded, replaced by the deep, resonant thrum of the planet. As they went deeper, the darkness was pushed back by veins of natural magma flowing behind quartz-like walls, casting everything in a shifting, blood-red glow. "This is the old way," Kayla explained, her voice echoing softly. "Before the humans came, before the spires, we lived in the veins of the mountains. These tunnels connect every major nest on the continent. They emerged into a cavern that took Eli's breath away. It was a cathedral of geology. The ceiling was lost in shadow hundreds of feet above. The walls were carved with relief sculptures of dragons 50 feet high, ancestors with wings spread wide, their eyes set with glowing gemstones. In the center of the vast space, a river of slow-moving lava cut through the floor, providing light and heat. Gathered on stone tiers around the central hearth were dozens of draconi. These were not the urbanized residents of Obsidian Terrace. These were clan leaders, and they wore ceremonial armor of bone and metal, their scales painted with complex clan markings. When Eli walked in, the conversation died. 100 golden eyes turned to him. The hostility was physical, a wall of pressure. Kayla placed a hand between Eli's shoulder blades and pushed him forward. "Mother," Kayla called out, her voice steady. "I have brought him." From the center of the assembly, a figure rose from an obsidian throne. Lady Vareth was terrifying. She was taller than Kayla, her scales the color of bleached bone, her horns crowned with rings of platinum. She moved with the slow, inevitable grace of a glacier. "You bring a human into the Heart Hall," Vareth said. Her voice was like grinding stones, but during a time of war. "I bring a witness," Kayla said, stepping up beside Eli, "and an ally." Vareth descended the steps, stopping inches from Eli. The heat radiating from her was intense, almost blistering. She smelled of ash and old blood. "He looks fragile," Vareth said, sniffing the air near his neck. "He smells of their chemicals and their fear. He has the data." "Mother," Kayla said, "he knows about the sensors." Vareth looked at Eli. "Is this true? Human? You know how they break the world?" Eli swallowed hard. His throat felt like sandpaper. "Yes. I saw the logs. They are over-extracting by 20% in the instability zones. They are hiding the pressure spikes." Vareth turned away, looking into the lava river. "It is not just extraction," she said. She gestured to a stone table. On it lay fragments of a shattered drone, a heliocore survey unit. "We recovered its memory core before it self-destructed," Vareth said. It contained communication fragments from the executive level. She tapped a crystal on the table. A garbled audio file played. It was Havel's voice. "Destabilization is proceeding on schedule. Once the structural integrity of the sector is compromised, the land value drops to 0. The clans will be forced to evacuate. We can purchase the rights for pennies on the credit under the guise of humanitarian reclamation." Eli felt sick. It wasn't just greed, It wasn't just negligence. It was a strategy. They are doing it on purpose, Eli whispered. They are causing the earthquakes to drive you out so they can buy the land cheap. They break our homes to buy the rubble, Vareth said, her voice trembling with rage. It is a slow genocide of our culture. And if we fight back, they call us savages and bring in the orbital gunships. The clan leaders muttered, a low rumble of agreement and anger. Kayla looked at Eli. Do you see now? There is no middle ground. Vareth turned back to Eli. My daughter believes you can help us expose this. She believes a human voice carries weight where ours does not. Eli looked at the faces around him. Scarred warriors, grieving mothers, ancient elders. He looked at Kayla, who was watching him with a desperate hope. I will help, Eli said. I have the raw data logs. If we combine them with your drone fragments, we can prove intent. We can prove it wasn't an accident. Vareth studied him for a long moment. Do not fail us. Eli Reyes, if you betray us, there is no hole deep enough on this planet to hide you. The meeting dispersed slowly, the leaders moving off to strategize in the side tunnels. Kayla touched Eli's arm. Come. You need to breathe. She led him away from the main hall, up a winding stair carved into the rock, to a secluded balcony overlooking a different section of the magma river. Here, the roar was muffled, the light softer. Eli leaned against the stone railing, his legs shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving him exhausted. You did well, Kayla said softly. She stood beside him, staring down at the molten flow. My mother does not like humans. That went better than I expected. She threatened to kill me, Eli said with a weak laugh. She threatened to find you, Kayla corrected. Killing was implied but not promised. That is affection for her. They stood in silence for a moment. The heat rising from the lava was hypnotic. Kayla turned to him. Why did you come here? Eli. Really, you are not a miner. You are not a soldier. You are smart. You could have worked anywhere in the core worlds. Why Draconis 3? Eli looked at his hands. They looked pale and small against the dark stone. I was suffocating, he admitted. On Earth, everything is gray. The sky, the buildings, the job. I woke up every day and I felt like I was already dead. I followed the rules. I did what I was told. And I hated it. He looked up at her. I wanted to go somewhere where the edges weren't sanded down. I wanted to feel something. I wanted to take a risk. He let out a breath. I guess I got what I wanted. Kayla stepped closer. The light from the lava caught the gold in her eyes, making them swirl. And now that you are here, she asked. Now that you see the fire, do you want to run back to the gray? No, Eli said. He realized it was the truest thing he had ever said. I don't want to leave. Kayla moved into his space. This time, there was no anger. There was only the heat of her body and the intensity of her gaze. She reached out. Her hand, large and tipped with razor-sharp claws, came up to his face. She moved with exquisite slowness. One wrong twitch could scar him for life. But she was gentle. She tilted his chin up with a single claw, forcing him to look at her. You are a strange creature. Tiny engineer, she whispered. You have no armor. Your skin breaks if we touch it too hard. Your bones are like glass. But you stand here, in the heart of the volcano, and you do not run. I am running towards something, Eli whispered. Kayla's eyes searched his. She lowered her head. The first kiss was hesitant. It was a question. Her lips were hot, dry, and firmer than a human's. Eli could feel the faint vibration of a growl in her throat, not of aggression, but of something deeper, a purr of contentment. He reached up, his hands tangling in the hair at the base of her horns. He pulled her closer. The hesitation vanished. Kayla made a sound low in her throat and the kiss deepened. It was fueled by the grief of the last few days, the anger at the injustice, and the desperate relief of finding connection in the dark. It was dangerous. Eli was acutely aware of the power she held back. Her hands settled on his waist, her claws flexing slightly against his jacket. She could snap him in half without effort. But she trembled with the strain of being gentle. The heat was overwhelming. It wasn't just the ambient temperature, it was her. It felt like kissing a storm. It felt like kissing a solar flare. Eli kissed her back with everything he had, pouring all his fear and his newfound courage into it. For a moment, the politics, the corporation, and the dying world didn't exist. There was only the fire and the man who was learning to burn. Kayla pulled away, gasping. She rested her forehead against his. Her eyes closed. Her wings were slightly unfurled, trembling. "This is foolishness," she whispered, her voice cracking. "What is?" Eli asked, breathless. "Loving anything right now," she said. Her voice was thick with emotion. "We are on the edge of a war, Eli. Our people cannot afford distractions. I cannot afford to lose you. You won't lose me," Eli said, fierce. "You don't know that," she said. She opened her eyes, and they were shining with unshed tears. "The corporation destroys everything that stands in its way. If they know what you mean to me, they will use you." She stepped back, putting a foot of distance between them. The loss of contact was a physical ache. "We have to focus," she said, her voice becoming firmer, more like the leader he had seen in the lobby. "We have a job to do. We get the evidence. We expose Havel. Then we see what is left. We keep our minds clear," she insisted. Eli looked at her. Her lips were swollen, her chest heaving. "My mind is clear," Eli said. "I know exactly what I am fighting for now." Kayla looked at him, and for a second, the mask almost slipped again. But she nodded. "Go," she said. "Take the maintenance tunnels back to the surface. It is not safe for you to be down here much longer." Eli hesitated, wanting to reach for her again. But he knew she was right. "Be careful. Kayla. You too. Eli." The climb back up to the surface was grueling. Eli's legs burned, but his mind was on fire. He could still feel the phantom pressure of her claws on his waist, the taste of smoke on his lips. He emerged into the sub-basement of Obsidian Terrace at 3 in the morning. The building was silent, vibrating with its usual geothermal hum. He took the stairs to the 4th floor, avoiding the elevators. He walked softly down the hallway to his apartment. He pressed his thumb against the scanner. Processing. The light didn't turn green immediately. It cycled yellow. Eli frowned. The door usually unlocked in a split second. Processing. He felt a prickle of unease on the back of his neck. Access granted. The light turned green, and the lock disengaged with a heavy click. Eli stepped inside. The apartment was dark, exactly as he had left it. The air was still warm, but something was wrong. He stood in the entryway, letting his eyes adjust. A small light was blinking on his wall console. A system notification. Eli walked over and tapped the screen. System log. Unauthorized bioscan initiated at 010. Source. External maintenance override. Duration. 15 minutes. Eli went cold. Someone had been in his apartment while he was gone. They hadn't tossed the place. They hadn't left a mess. They had come in, scanned his files, scanned his living space, and left. They knew. They knew he wasn't sleeping in his bed. They knew he had been gone for hours. Eli walked to the window. He looked out at the magma river below. The same river he had just stood over with Kayla. He touched his lips. They were still tingling. He had crossed a line tonight. He had crossed it politically by meeting Verith, and he had crossed it emotionally on that balcony. There was no going back to the gray now. Eli locked the door and engaged the manual deadbolt, knowing it wouldn't stop them if they really wanted in. He sat on the edge of his alcove, watching the door, and waited for the morning to bring the war. The atmosphere in Ashen Gate had changed from a simmer to a boil. It began with the sky. The deep, bruised purple of the Draconis 3 twilight was now crisscrossed by the relentless grid patterns of security drones. They were black, sleek, and shaped like predatory insects, their optical sensors sweeping the streets with beams of harsh blue light. They buzzed constantly, a low-frequency hum that vibrated in the teeth and set nerves on edge. Heliocore was tightening the noose. Eli stood in the queue for the morning shift entry at the geothermal plant. The line was moving slower than usual. At the front, near the blast doors, a new checkpoint had been installed overnight. It was a white, sterile archway manned by armed corporate security guards in full riot gear. Next, a guard barked. Eli stepped forward. He tried to keep his breathing even. In his pocket, hidden inside a hollowed-out multi-tool, was the encryption chip Mira had given him. If they searched him physically, he was finished. "Step into the scanner," the guard ordered. "State your name and employee identification." "Eli Reyes," Eli said, stepping into the white light of the arch. "ID 8940. The machine hummed. It wasn't just a metal detector. A halo of light descended around his head. Neural resonance scan initiating. A synthetic voice announced, "Excessive cortisol detected. Subject is experiencing elevated stress levels." Eli's heart hammered. He forced himself to think of something boring. He thought about the user manual for a recalibration wrench. He thought about the color beige. "Explain the stress anomaly," the guard said, his hand resting on the stun baton at his belt. "There are riots in the city," Eli said, keeping his voice flat, "and I nearly got hit by a falling rock on the commute. I think being stressed is a rational response." The guard stared at him through the visor of his helmet. The silence stretched for 5 seconds, then 10. The machine chimed. "Loyalty index within acceptable parameters. Pass. Move along." The guard grunted, losing interest. Eli walked through the arch, his legs feeling like jelly. He didn't exhale until he was safe inside the noise of the turbine hall. The mission was simple and completely insane. Eli sat at his workstation in the sub-control room. The room was empty, save for the blinking lights of the server banks. It was lunch hour, the only time the floor managers cleared out. He plugged the encryption chip into his terminal. On his screen, a chat window popped up. The text was green and immediate. "Mira, you are in. Do not get comfortable. You have 5 minutes before the sector sweep. If you get caught, I do not know you. Eli. Good to see you too. Mira. Mira. Less typing, more downloading. I am looping the security camera feed, but I can't stop the physical patrols. If a bot rolls by, look busy." Eli navigated to the restricted directory. He bypassed the standard interface, diving into the raw command line. He found the files, vent output logs, Sector 4, unfiltered. He initiated the copy. The progress bar appeared. 1%. It was agonizingly slow. The file sizes were massive, containing terabytes of sensor data, pressure readings, and audio logs from the extraction heads. 10%. Outside the glass walls of the control room, a security bot, a tracked unit with a heavy chassis and a rotating sensor head, rolled down the corridor. Eli froze. He picked up a stylus and tapped it against his chin. staring at a blank spreadsheet on his secondary monitor, trying to look like a bored engineer earning his paycheck. The bot paused outside the glass, its red eye swiveled, focusing on Eli. 25%. Eli didn't breathe. He didn't blink. The bot word processed his clearance badge from a distance and rolled on. Mira, you are sweating. I can see your biometrics spiking from here. Relax. Reyes, you are going to give yourself a stroke. Eli, it is a lot of data. Mira, it is a smoking gun. Just get it and get out. 50%. A warning light flashed on his screen. Network latency detected. Rerouting. The download speed dropped. The seconds ticked by like hours. Come on, Eli whispered. 75%. He heard footsteps in the corridor. Heavy boots, human steps, not mechanical. Eli minimized the download window, bringing up a diagnostic schematic of a cooling pump. The door to the control room opened. It was Director Havel. Eli felt his stomach drop through the floor. He turned his chair slowly. Director, Eli said. Havel walked in. He looked immaculate as always, but there was a tightness to his jaw that hadn't been there a week ago. He stopped behind Eli's chair, looking at the screens. Working through lunch. Reyes, Havel asked. Just chasing a ghost in the pump schematics. Eli lied. The flow variance in Sector 7 is bothering me. Havel placed a hand on the back of Eli's chair. You are a diligent worker. Eli, I appreciate that. Diligence is rare. Most people just want to cause trouble. He leaned in closer. I heard you had a conversation with the police drones this morning. High stress levels. The city is a war zone, sir, Eli said. It is hard to relax. Havel stared at the screen. The minimized download window was vibrating slightly in the corner of the taskbar, a single pixel out of place. If Havel looked closely. We are bringing order to the chaos, Havel said softly. It is a painful process, but necessary. Evolution always requires a little friction. Havel patted the chair. Don't burn yourself out. We need you sharp for the next phase. Havel turned and walked out. Eli waited until the door clicked shut. He maximized the window. Download complete. He yanked the chip, shoved it into his boot, and slumped over the desk, gasping for air. Mira, did you die? You went silent. Eli, close enough. I have it. Mira, good. Now get me a raise. And a vacation. Somewhere cold. Ideally an ice moon with zero volcanic activity. That evening, the tension in Obsidian Terrace was palpable. The usual laughter and music were gone. The halls were quiet, save for the sound of news feeds murmuring behind locked doors. Eli went up to the roof. He needed air. He needed to see the sky, even if it was full of drones. He found the Draconai warriors training. Thyra and 3 others were running drills on the reinforced section of the roof. They moved with a speed that defied their size. Blades flashed in the twilight, heavy curved swords that looked like they could cleave a car in half. They sparred with a brutality that made Eli wince, metal ringing against metal, scales deflecting blows, and in the center of them was Kayla. She wasn't using a weapon. She was moving through a form of unarmed combat that looked like a dance of destruction. She dodged a swing from Thyra, ducking low, her tail sweeping out to knock the warrior's legs. When Thyra stumbled, Kayla spun, her hand stopping inches from Thyra's throat, her claws extended. Dead, Kayla said, breathing hard. Thyra grunted, getting to her feet. You are fast today. Angry fast. Kayla wiped sweat from her brow. She looked up and saw Eli standing by the access door. She dismissed the others with a wave. Thyra cast a suspicious glance at Eli before leading the warriors downstairs. Kayla walked over to him. She was radiant with exertion. Her bronze scales were flushed with heat, shimmering in the fading light. She smelled of ozone and exertion. "You are staring, tiny engineer," she said. "It is hard not to," Eli admitted. "You look lethal." "That is the point," Kayla said. She grabbed a towel and wiped her neck. "If the corporation decides to clear the building, we will not leave quietly." Eli stepped closer. The download chip was burning a hole in his pocket, but he didn't want to talk about data yet. He just wanted a moment of normalcy. "I got the logs," he said quietly. Kayla paused. She looked at him, her eyes widening slightly. "Truly?" "Yes. It is worse than we thought, but we can prove it now." Kayla let out a long breath, her shoulders sagging slightly. "Thank the ancestors." She looked at him, really looked at him, and a slow smirk tugged at her lips. "You are brave for a human," she said. "Or foolish. Maybe both," Eli said. Kayla laughed. She reached out, her hand glowing with a sudden intense heat. She snapped her fingers near his ear. A tiny burst of controlled flame popped into existence just for a second. Eli yelped and jumped back, batting at his ear. "You singed me. Just the ends," Kayla teased. She reached out and ruffled his hair, her claws gently scraping against his scalp. It needed a trim anyway. Her touch lingered. The playfulness faded, replaced by something heavier. Her hand slid down to cup his cheek. Her palm was incredibly hot, but Eli leaned into it. "Thank you." "Eli," she whispered. Later that night, the building screamed. It started as a low rumble, deep in the bedrock, and then the floor of Eli's apartment pitched violently to the left. Books fell off the shelves. The glass of water on his table shattered. A tremor. A big one. The lights in the apartment flickered and died. The emergency backup kicked in, bathing the room in a wash of blood-red light. Eli scrambled to the door. He had to make sure the structure was holding. He burst into the hallway. The alarm was blaring. Other doors were opening, panicked residents looking out. The floor lurched again. Eli stumbled, losing his footing on the slick tile. He pitched forward, bracing for impact. He didn't hit the floor. He hit something warm and solid. Kayla had him. She had come out of her apartment one floor up and vaulted the stairs. She caught him with one arm, pulling him upright against her chest. "Steady," she said, her voice calm amidst the chaos. "It is passing. The wave is rolling through." They stood there in the narrow hallway, bathed in the flashing red emergency lights. The tremor subsided into a low vibration, but neither of them moved. Eli was pressed against her. He could feel the hard ridges of her abdominal scales through her thin sleep shirt. He could feel the heat radiating off her like a furnace. "Are you okay?" Kayla asked, looking down at him. Her eyes were glowing brightly in the dim light, the pupils blown wide. Eli nodded, breathless. "I am fine. Just shaken." He didn't pull away. He looked up at her, and the adrenaline of the quake morphed instantly into something else. Kayla looked at his mouth. Her breathing hitched. "You make me feel too human." "Eli," she whispered. Her voice was a mixture of confession and accusation. "What do you mean?" "I should be thinking about the clan," she said, her hand tightening on his shoulder, her claws flexing against the fabric of his shirt. "I should be thinking about the war, but all I can think about is you." "It is weak." "It isn't weak," Eli said. He reached up and pulled her head down. This kiss wasn't like the one in the cavern. That had been tentative, an exploration. This was a collision. Kayla made a sound low in her throat, a growl of surrender. She lifted him up, her strength effortless, pressing him against the wall of the corridor. Eli wrapped his legs around her waist, clinging to her as if she were the only solid thing in a falling world. Her mouth was hot, demanding. Her tongue grazed his, rougher than a human's. The heat of her body soaked into him, burning away the cold fear of the tremor. The door to Eli's apartment was still open, but Kayla didn't go there. She carried him up the stairs, moving swiftly, her tail balancing them as she climbed. She kicked her own door open and carried him inside. Her apartment was a sanctuary. It smelled of wood smoke, spiced tea, and old leather. The walls were draped in tapestries depicting the history of her clan, dragons flying over burning mountains, battles fought with claw and fire. She set him down on the edge of her bed, a massive platform covered in furs and silks. The red emergency light from the window cast long shadows across the room. Kayla stood between his knees, looking down at him. She touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "You are so soft," she murmured. "No scales, no armor. How do you survive in this world?" "I have good neighbors," Eli whispered. Kayla smiled, a sad, tender expression. She sat beside him. The frantic energy of the hallway dissipated, leaving a quiet, heavy intimacy. They didn't rush. They sat there for a long time, just talking. Kayla spoke of her childhood in the volcanic caves, of the pressure of being Vareth's daughter. She talked about the fear that lived in her chest, not fear of death, but fear of irrelevance, fear that her people would fade away, becoming nothing more than myths in a corporate history book. "It is like standing on the lip of a volcano," she said, staring at her hands. "You know the drop is there. You know the fire is waiting. But the view is so beautiful. You cannot step back." Eli took her hand. His pale fingers looked fragile, interlaced with her bronze, clawed ones. "I am not going to let you fall. Kayla, you cannot stop gravity." "Eli, I can build a bridge," he said. "That is what engineers do." Kayla looked at him, and her eyes softened. "Stay," she said. "I am not going anywhere." They lay back on the furs. It was a strange, beautiful contrast. Eli curled against her side, the heat of her body keeping the night chill at bay. Her arm, heavy and protective, draped over him. He felt the slow, thunderous beat of her heart against his back. It was a lullaby of power. For the first time since landing on Draconis 3, Eli slept without dreaming of the void. The morning brought the sun, and with it, the end of the world. Eli woke up alone in the bed. The spot beside him was still warm. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, feeling a lingering sense of peace. Then he heard the voices in the living room. They were sharp, angry. He scrambled out of bed, pulling on his clothes. He walked out to find Kayla standing by the window. She was gripping a data pad so hard the screen was cracking. Thyra was there too, looking grim. "What happened?" Eli asked. Kayla spun around. Her face was unrecognizable. The tenderness of the night before was gone, replaced by a cold, jagged mask of betrayal. "There was a raid," Thyra said, her voice rough. 2 hours ago, Heliocore security hit the deep tunnels. They found the community hall." Eli went cold. "Vareth?" "She escaped," Kayla said. Her voice was dead. "She collapsed a tunnel behind her to block them. But they took 12 others, elders, healers. They dragged them out in chains. I am so sorry," Eli stammered. "But we have the data now. We can—" Kayla threw the datapad at him. It skidded across the floor and hit his boot. "Read it," she snapped. Eli picked it up. It was a news feed from the corporate network. "Security update. Terrorist cell dismantled. Acting on internal intelligence, Heliocore security forces successfully raided a radicalized Draconized stronghold. The location was verified using encrypted tracking logs provided by a corporate informant." Eli looked up, confused. "Informant?" Scroll down, Kayla hissed. Eli swiped the screen. There was a leaked image of the authorization code used to bypass the tunnel security door. User ID, 8940E. Reyes, the room spun. No, Eli whispered. No, this is impossible. Is it? Kayla walked toward him. She moved like a predator now. Did you not use your access to download the vent logs yesterday? Did you not bypass the security protocols? Yes. And did you not come to the deep tunnels with me? Did you not see exactly where the hall was? Kayla, please. I didn't give them this. They must have cloned my ID. They must be tracking me. Or you gave it to them, she said. She stopped inches from him. The heat radiating from her was painful now. Maybe you got scared. Maybe Havel made you an offer. Maybe you realize that sleeping with a dragon is fun, but dying for one is inconvenient. Eli looked into her eyes, searching for the woman who had held him hours ago. She wasn't there. You don't believe that, Eli said, his voice shaking. You know me. I thought I did, Kayla said. Her voice broke just for a second before hardening again. But my people are in cages, Eli, and your name is on the lock. She pointed to the door. Get out. Kayla, get out. The roar shook the walls. A plume of fire erupted from her mouth, scorching the ceiling. Eli stumbled back. He looked at Thera, but the warrior turned her back on him. He looked at Kayla one last time. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face, evaporating instantly on her hot skin. She looked like she was breaking apart. I didn't do this, Eli whispered. He turned and ran. Eli didn't remember the walk back to his apartment. He felt numb, hollowed out. He entered his room and locked the door. It felt flimsy. Everything felt flimsy. He walked to his console. The red light was blinking. A new message. He didn't want to read it. He knew what it was. He pressed play. There was no audio, just text on the black screen. You asked the wrong questions, Mr. Reyes. Stop, or you will join the ones we are located. H. Eli stared at the letter. H. Havel. It was a perfect setup. Havel knew Eli had downloaded the logs. He had let him do it. He had used Eli's ID to authorize the raid, knowing it would destroy his credibility with the Draconi. If Eli went to the authorities, he was the leak. If he went to the Draconi, he was the traitor. He was isolated. He was framed. And he was entirely alone. Eli walked to the window. Below him, the magma river flowed, indifferent to his ruin. He thought about Kayla's words. The corporation destroys everything that stands in its way. He thought about her face when she screamed at him. He thought about the elders in chains. Fear curled in his stomach, cold and sharp. He could leave. He could take the shuttle to the domes, plead ignorance, maybe even get a transfer back to Earth. He could survive. But then he remembered the heat of Kayla's skin. He remembered the children flying in the hallway. He remembered the feeling of standing on the edge of the volcano and choosing not to run. Eli Reyes wiped his face. He looked at the magma river, and his expression hardened. They wanted to make him a villain. Fine. He would be the villain that burned their whole house down. The archive node Delta Zero was not built for human comfort. It was built for data preservation in the most inhospitable environment Heliocore could find. Suspended by gravity tethers 2,000 meters above the great magma lake of the southern hemisphere. The facility looked like a black needle floating in a sea of fire. The air outside was superheated plasma, constantly churned by magnetic storms that acted as a natural lethal firewall. If you wanted to break in, you had to survive the approach first. Eli sat in the cargo hold of an automated supply drone, his knees pressed against his chest. The drone was unpressurized, so he and Mira were wearing stolen atmospheric maintenance suits. The interior smelled of stale, recycled air and fear. Mira tapped her helmet against his. Her voice crackled over the short-range comms. "Stop shaking. Reyes," she said. "You are vibrating the hull." "I am not shaking," Eli replied, his teeth chattering. "It is the turbulence. We are flying through a magnetic storm inside a metal box." "We are flying in a supply drone marked waste disposal," Mira corrected. "If security scans us, we are garbage. If they do not, we are garbage that breaks into a high-security server." The drone lurched violently. Through the small viewport, Eli saw a flash of blinding violet lightning arc across the magma below. The lake was a churning ocean of molten rock, bright enough to sear the retina. The drone docked with a metallic clang. The airlock cycled with a hiss of equalization. Mira popped the hatch. She pulled a datapad from her suit's utility belt and plugged it into the door panel. "We have 3 minutes before the drone departs," she said, her fingers flying across the screen. "I am looping the hangar sensors. Go." They scrambled out into the receiving bay. The facility was dimly lit by pulsing orange emergency strips, the primary power conserved for the massive cooling systems keeping the servers from melting. A low, thrumming vibration permeated everything, the sound of petabytes of data being written and overwritten. Eli stripped off his helmet. The air here was thin, hot, and smelled of ozone and sterilized plastic. "Which way to the core?" Eli whispered. Mira pointed down a long, curved corridor. "Down. Always down. The archive core is at the tip of the needle, closest to the heat source. Thermal energy powers the encryption." They moved quickly. Eli took the lead, scanning the walls for conduit junctions. "Wait!" Eli hissed, holding up a hand. Ahead of them, a laser grid spanned the hallway, invisible to the naked eye, but Eli's multi-tool picked up the emitter frequencies. "Thermal tripwires," Eli muttered. "If we break the beam, the corridor vents into the atmosphere." "Can you disable it?" Mira asked, looking over her shoulder. Eli popped a panel on the wall. He stared at the tangled mess of fiber optics and coolant tubes. He didn't hack the code, he hacked the physics. He located the liquid nitrogen feed for the local wall cooling. With a precise twist of his wrench, he loosened the valve seal. A jet of supercooled gas hissed out, creating a localized fog bank. The temperature drop should blind the thermal sensors for about 10 seconds. Eli said. "On 3?" Mira asked. 1, 2, 3. They sprinted. The cold gas bit into Eli's exposed skin, stinging like needles. But the alarm remained silent. They slid under the final beam just as the fog dissipated and the sensors reset. "Nice trick, engineer," Mira breathed, dusting herself off. "I fix broken things," Eli said, getting to his feet. "Sometimes I have to break them first." While Eli and Mira descended into the mechanical belly of the archive, Kayla stood in the war room of the Draconide deep tunnels. The room was shouting. Clan leaders from the Iron Scale, the Ashwalkers, and the Sky-Tearers were pounding their fists on the obsidian table. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of aggression. "They raided the hearth hall," a scar-faced elder roared. "They took my sister in chains. We cannot wait for diplomacy. We strike the processing plants tonight. Burn them out," another shouted. "Collapse the vents. Let the humans choke on the ash." Lady Vareth sat on her throne, her face a mask of stony exhaustion. She looked at her daughter. Kayla stood off to the side, leaning against a pillar. Her arms were crossed, but her claws were digging into her biceps. She felt like a ghost. Her mind was not in the room. It was replaying the look on Eli's face when she had screamed at him. The betrayal, the hurt. "I didn't do this," he had whispered. At the time, The evidence had been blinding. But now, in the cold light of the war room, doubt was gnawing at her. Eli was many things: soft, naive, terrified of conflict, but he was not a good liar. And he had stood on the roof with her, his heart beating a rhythm of pure, unadulterated adoration. Would a traitor look at her like that? Would a corporate spy download incriminating logs and then bring them to her? Kayla closed her eyes, extending her senses. The bond she had felt, that strange magnetic pull that defied biology, was faint. But it was there. It felt like a thread of heat stretching out from her chest, pulling her toward the south, toward the firelands. Kayla opened her eyes. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. "He is not running," she whispered. Vareth looked up, catching the whisper over the shouting of the elders. "Daughter?" Kayla stepped forward. Silence rippled outward from her. "He is not running," Kayla said louder. "Eli, he did not go to the domes." The iron scale elder spat on the floor. "The human traitor? He is probably drinking champagne with Havel right now." "No," Kayla said, the certainty crystallizing in her chest. "He is doing something reckless, something stupid." She looked at the map on the table. Her eyes traced the line of the thread she felt. It pointed directly to the center of the southern magma lake, to the archive. Kayla's blood went cold. "He is going for the source," she said. "He is going to the archive node." "That is suicide," Vareth said. "The storms alone would tear a shuttle apart." Kayla turned to the exit. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just unfurled her wings, the leather snapping taut. "Kayla!" Vareth shouted, standing up. "Where are you going?" "To save the idiot who is trying to save us," Kayla growled. She launched herself down the tunnel, shifting her form before she even hit the exit ramp. Bones cracked and reshaped, scales thickened into armor, and the woman vanished, replaced by a beast of bronze and gold, roaring her defiance into the dark. Eli and Mira reached the core room. It was a spherical chamber suspended in the center of the station. The walls were transparent aluminum, offering a terrifying view of the magma lake 2 kilometers below. The server banks were arranged in a circle, bathed in the pulsing orange light of the interface nodes. Eli connected the portable shard to the main terminal. "Accessing root directory," Mira said, typing furiously on her datapad. "Bypassing biolocks. Eli, keep the cooling system stable. If the processors heat up while we are pulling this much data, the fail-safes will purge the room." "And purge means?" Eli asked, adjusting a pressure valve. "Incinerate," Mira clarified. "Right. Good to know." The progress bar appeared on the main screen. The data began to flow. Eli watched the file headers scroll by. Project, Obsidian, Standardization Protocol, Asset Liquidation. "Wait," Eli said. "Open that one. Project Obsidian." Mira tapped a key. The file expanded. It wasn't just a mining report, and it was a planetary blueprint. Objective: systematic destabilization of indigenous populations on Draconis 3, Lyra 9, and Ignis Prime. Method: induce tectonic stress to force evacuation. Goal: acquisition of land rights at 10% of market value. "They are doing it everywhere," Eli whispered, horror dawning on him. "It is a franchise. They break the planets, buy them cheap, and strip mine them." "It is a corporate terraforming strategy," Mira said, her voice shaking. "This is huge. Eli, this brings down the whole board of directors." "Look at the subfolder," Eli said, pointing. "Subject, Reyes." Mira opened it. An audio file played. It was Havel's voice, clear and crisp. "The engineer is becoming a liability. He has made contact with the Vareth clan. Use his biometric profile to authorize the raid on the deep tunnels. Clone his credentials. Make it look like he sold them out. If the dragons kill him, it saves us the cost of a severance package. If they do not, we will arrest him for corporate espionage. Eli closed his eyes. He let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for 24 hours. I knew it, he whispered. I knew I wasn't crazy. We have it, Mira said, grinning fiercely. We have the proof. Warning. Security breach detected. The voice of the facility computer was polite and terrifying. Unsanctioned data transfer in progress. Security protocols engaged. The doors to the core room slammed shut. Red lights began to strobe. They found us, Mira yelled. How much longer on the download? 90%, Eli shouted over the rising alarm. Outside the transparent walls, the hangar bays opened. A swarm of security drones poured out like angry wasps. They weren't the stun drones from the city. These were heavy suppression units equipped with plasma repeaters. They are cutting through the door, Mira shouted. She pulled a heavy pistol from her belt, something she had definitely not been issued by HR. Eli watched the progress bar. 95, 98. The door buckled as a plasma torch cut through the lock. 100%. Eli yanked the shard. I have it. He turned to Mira. We have to go. Mira looked at the door, then at the only other exit, the emergency waste chute labeled atmospheric vent. The drones breached the door. Laser fire scarred the server banks. Mira returned fire, taking cover behind a console. Go! Mira screamed. Mira, come on, I can't! Mira yelled, pinning down a drone with suppressing fire. Someone has to hold the lock. If they override the terminal, they can wipe the shard remotely. Go! Reyes, jump! Eli hesitated. The chute was a dark hole leading straight down to hell. Go! Mira roared, looking at him with wild, desperate eyes. Make it count! Eli clutched the shard to his chest. He looked at Mira one last time, whispered a thank you she couldn't hear, and threw himself into the chute. He fell. The chute was designed to eject trash, not people. It was a smooth, frictionless tube that angled sharply downward. Eli slid for 5 seconds in total darkness, screaming, before he was spat out into the air. The heat hit him like a physical wall. He was falling through the sky, 2,000 meters above a lake of fire. The facility was receding above him, a black speck against the purple clouds. He fumbled for the emergency grav chute on his stolen suit. He yanked the cord. Nothing happened. He yanked it again. Malfunction. His suit displayed. Deploying reserve drag fin. A small flap of fabric popped out. It didn't stop his fall. It just slowed him down enough to prolong the terror. He was going to die. He was going to hit the lava and vaporize before his brain could even register the pain. The air around him shimmered with heat. The plasma storms crackled, sending arcs of lightning dangerously close. Eli squeezed his eyes shut. He clutched the shard. At least I tried, he thought. Kaela, I tried. A shadow fell over him. It was massive, blocking out the glare of the lava. A roar shattered the air, a sound so loud it vibrated in Eli's marrow. He opened his eyes. Rising from the thermal updrafts was a creature out of myth. She was enormous, her wingspan stretching 50 feet wide. Her scales were not just bronze, they were living metal, gleaming gold and copper in the firelight. Kaela. She wasn't flying. She was swimming through the air. She banked hard, her massive golden eyes locking onto him. She dove. Eli watched her come, terrified and awestruck. She was beautiful. She was terrifying. She swooped underneath him, matching his terminal velocity. She reached up with her hind legs, her talons spread wide. She caught him. It wasn't gentle. The impact knocked the wind out of him. Her claws, each the size of a sickle, wrapped around his torso. She was careful not to puncture the suit, but the grip was iron tight. Then, She pulled up. The G-force nearly blacked him out. Kayla beat her wings frantically, fighting gravity. They dipped dangerously low. Eli felt the radiant heat of the lava baking his legs. The tips of Kayla's wings grazed a thermal plume, the delicate membrane scorching and blackening. She roared in pain, a high-pitched shriek, but she didn't let go. She climbed. She pumped her wings, fighting the air, fighting the weight, fighting the pain. Eli looked down. The lava lake was receding. He looked up. He was pressed against the warm, scaled underbelly of a dragon. She carried him away from the facility, weaving through the plasma bolts of the pursuing drones. She opened her mouth and unleashed a torrent of fire backward, a blinding stream of magma breath that melted a drone in mid-air. They flew. For Eli, clinging to her leg, it was a blur of wind, heat, and the thunderous beat of her heart against his side. It was the most terrifying, magnificent moment of his life. They crashed in the Shadow Canyon, 40 kilometers north of the facility. It wasn't a graceful landing. Kayla's injured wing gave out on the final approach. They tumbled into the soft, ash-covered ground, rolling to a stop near a steaming geothermal vent. Eli was thrown clear. He scrambled to his feet, ripping off his helmet. Kayla! The massive dragon lay on the ground, breathing in ragged, heaving gasps. Smoke curled from her scorched wing. Her scales were dull, coated in dust. Slowly, painfully, she began to shift. It was a visceral process. The massive form seemed to fold in on itself, bones cracking and rearranging, mass condensing. Within moments, the dragon was gone. Kayla, the woman, lay in the ash. She was naked, her clothes shredded by the transformation. Her skin was covered in burns, angry red welts across her back and arms where the heat of the lava had penetrated her defenses. Her left arm, corresponding to the injured wing, was badly blistered. Eli ran to her. He ripped off his maintenance jacket and draped it over her. "Kayla, can you hear me?" She opened her eyes. The gold was dim, hazed with pain. "You are heavy, tiny engineer," she rasped, her voice a dry croak. Eli laughed, a choked, hysterical sound. He fumbled with the emergency medkit from his belt. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped the dermal regenerator twice. "I am sorry," he babbled, spraying cool analgesic foam onto her burns. "I am so sorry, and I shouldn't have jumped. I shouldn't have made you come," Kayla hissed as the foam hit her skin, but she reached out with her good hand and grabbed his wrist. "Stop," she said. Eli froze. "Look at me." He looked at her. Her face was smudged with ash, her hair a wild tangle, but her eyes were clear. "I did not come because you jumped," she said fiercely. "I came because you were falling." She tried to sit up, wincing. You came back for me," Eli whispered. "Even after everything I said, even after the raid, I was wrong," Kayla said. She touched his face, her thumb tracing his cheekbone. "I was hurt, and when I am hurt, I bite. It is my nature. But when I felt you in danger, the anger didn't matter." She looked down at her burned arm. "I pushed you away because I was afraid. Eli, I have lost my father to the mines. I have lost my brothers to the guards. I thought if I made you leave, I wouldn't have to watch you die." She looked up, her eyes wet, but watching you fall, that was worse. Eli dropped the medical kit. He pulled her into his arms, careful of her burns. He buried his face in her neck, smelling the smoke and the ozone and the sweat. "I got the proof." He sobbed into her shoulder. "I have the shard. It proves everything. It proves Havel framed me. It proves they are trying to destroy the clans." Kayla held him tight, her chin resting on his head. She rocked him slowly, like a child. I know, she whispered. I know. They sat there for a long time in the steaming canyon. The sun began to rise, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and pink. They were both battered, scarred, and exhausted. Eli pulled back to look at her. He traced the line of a healing burn on her shoulder. Your wing, he said. It will heal, Kayla said dismissively. Scales grow back. Dead men do not. She looked at the data shard clutching in Eli's hand. So, she said, her voice gaining strength, we have the weapon. How do we fire it? We broadcast it, Eli said, his engineer's brain finally kicking back online. The main relay tower in Ashen Gate. If we can plug this into the central feed, we can override every screen on the planet. Kayla nodded. Her eyes began to glow again, the fire returning. My people are ready to fight, she said, but they are fighting blind. If we show them the truth, if we show the humans the truth, then the game changes, Eli said. He stood up and offered her his hand. Can you walk? Kayla took his hand. Her grip was strong, her claws retracting to be gentle. With you, she said, pulling herself up. I can fly. She stood tall, the morning light gleaming off her bronze skin. She looked like a queen of ashes. Broken but unbroken. Let us go home. Eli, she said. We have a director to burn. They climbed out of the canyon together, silhouettes against the rising sun, walking toward the city that wanted them dead, ready to set the world on fire with the truth. Ashen Gate was a powder keg waiting for a single spark, and Eli Reyes was holding the match. The city had transformed since the raid on the deep tunnels. The neon skyline, usually a chaotic tapestry of commerce and motion, was now stark and divided. Corporate security barricades, glowing with hard blue containment fields, choked the major intersections. Behind them, Heliocore troops in heavy exosuits patrolled with mechanical precision, their plasma rifles humming. Opposite them, on the rooftops and the Gothic gargoyles of the ancient architecture, the Draconi waited. They were silhouettes against the smog-choked sky, their throats glowing with suppressed fire, wings half unfurled. The silence in the streets was heavy, the kind of silence that comes before a thunderclap. Eli crouched behind a ventilation unit on a roof overlooking the central plaza. He was battered, his maintenance jacket torn, his face smeared with soot from the canyon crash. Beside him, Kayla looked like a deity of vengeance. Her flight leathers were scorched, and bandages wrapped her left arm, but her golden eyes burned with a terrifying clarity. Are you ready? She asked. Her voice was low, barely audible over the wind. Eli checked the data shard in his pocket for the 10th time. I am terrified, he admitted, but I am ready. A voice crackled in his earpiece. It was Mira. Audio check. Can you hear me? World's worst rebel. Loud and clear. Mira, Eli whispered. Are you safe? I am currently routing my signal through 3 garbage satellites and a coffee maker in Sector 6. Mira replied. They will not find me. But you need to move. The security rotation on the hollow tower cycles in 2 minutes. The target rose above them, the spire of voices. It was the tallest structure in Ashen Gate, a needle of glass and steel that projected news, advertisements, and corporate mandates to every screen on the planet. If they wanted the truth to be seen, they had to plug it directly into the heart of that tower. Let us go, Kayla commanded. She signaled to the shadows. Thyra and a squad of Ashwalker warriors emerged, their weapons drawn. They moved with fluid silence, dropping from the roof to the access bridge below. The infiltration was not subtle. It was a breach. They hit the lower lobby of the tower like a storm. Thyra kicked the doors in, and the Draconai warriors flooded the space, using their massive shields to deflect the initial volley of stun fire from the surprised guards. Eli and Kayla sprinted through the chaos. "Stairs!" Eli shouted, pointing to the emergency maintenance well. "The elevators will be locked down." They hit the stairwell, climbing fast. The tower was 100 stories tall. They needed to get to floor 80, the broadcast core. By floor 20, the alarm was screaming. "Reyes," Mira's voice cut in. "Urgent. They are venting the stairwells. Gas deployment in 10 seconds. Eli stopped, looking at the conduit pipes running along the wall. He recognized the color coding. Yellow for gas, red for heat. "Kayla," Eli yelled. "Warm them up." He pointed to the red pipe. Kayla didn't ask questions. She grabbed the pipe with her good hand, her scales glowing white-hot. She pumped thermal energy directly into the metal. Eli used his wrench to smash the valve on the adjacent water line. The superheated pipe met the high-pressure water. The explosion of steam was instantaneous and violent. It blew the stairwell doors off their hinges on the floors above and below, creating a pressurized wall of white fog that confused the sensors and blinded the gas deployment vents. "Move!" Eli choked out, coughing in the humidity. They scrambled upward, the steam masking their heat signatures from the drones buzzing outside the windows. By floor 50, corporate reinforcements had set up a kill box. Heavy troopers with riot shields blocked the landing. Kayla took the lead. She didn't breathe fire in the confined space. It would have cooked them all. Instead, she used her tail and her terrifying strength. She hit the line of shields like a battering ram, scattering the troopers like toys. One soldier raised a rifle at Eli. Thyra, leaping over the railing from the flight below, slammed the flat of her blade into the soldier's helmet, knocking him unconscious. "Keep climbing, human!" Thyra roared, her face split in a grin of pure adrenaline. "We will hold the rear." Eli and Kayla burst onto the 80th floor. The broadcast core was a circular room surrounded by floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the city under siege. Banks of servers hummed in the center, monitored by terrified technicians who scrambled under their desks as the Dragon Woman and the disheveled engineer burst in. Eli ran to the main console. "Mira, I am at the terminal," he shouted. "Plug it in," Mira ordered. "I am smashing the firewall from my end. You have 30 seconds before they cut the hard line." Eli jammed the shard into the port. His fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the lockout protocols with codes Mira was feeding him through the earpiece. The door to the core room hissed. It wasn't security. It was a drone, a heavy assault unit that had smashed through the window. Glass raining down like diamonds. Its cannons spun up, targeting Eli. Kayla moved. She stepped between Eli and the machine. She didn't have a weapon. She opened her mouth, and the air in the room warped. The stream of fire that erupted from her throat was blinding. It wasn't just flame. It was concentrated plasma. It hit the drone and melted the chassis instantly, turning the machine into a puddle of slag on the pristine white floor. Eli didn't look up. "Upload 90%. The room shook as an explosion hit the floor below. "Done!" Mira shouted. "We are live. Reyes, the whole planet is watching." Eli hit the final key. Override. Global broadcast. Across Draconis 3, every screen changed. The giant holographic billboards in the city center flickered and cleared. The data pads in the hands of the miners paused. The displays in the corporate offices went black, then bright white. A video played. It was shaky footage from a drone, but the audio was crystal clear. "Destabilization is proceeding on schedule." It was Havel's voice. "We can purchase the rights for pennies on the credit." Then came the documents. Fast-scrolling logs of the over-extraction orders. the pressure sensor data that Eli had risked his life to steal, showing the deliberate stress placed on the tectonic plates beneath the Draconite settlements. And finally, the kill order, the message authorizing the raid on the deep tunnels using Eli's stolen credentials. The city went silent. The fighting in the streets paused as soldiers and warriors alike looked up at the towering holograms. Then, the feed cut to a live view of the core room. Eli stood there, breathless, dirty, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. Beside him stood Kayla, smoke still curling from her lips, her presence undeniable and regal. A second window opened in the feed. It was Director Havel, sitting in his office, looking flushed and frantic. Cut the feed. Havel was screaming at someone off-screen. This is unauthorized. This is fabricated alien propaganda. Kayla stepped forward. She looked directly into the camera lens. Her golden eyes were magnified on screens 10 stories high. I am Kayla, daughter of Vareth, of the Ashwalker clan, she said. Her voice was calm, resonant, carrying the weight of centuries. And I am not a fabrication. She pointed a clawed hand at the scrolling data. These are the bones of your conspiracy. Director, the flow rates in Sector 4 were increased by 200%. The pressure valves were manually locked. You did not just ignore the danger. You built the earthquake, Havel sneered, trying to regain control. You are a terrorist, and that man standing next to you is a disgruntled employee who was fired for incompetence. No one believes a traitor. Eli stepped into the light. He looked at the camera. He looked at the city. I am a traitor, Eli said. His voice shook slightly, then steadied. I betrayed the company protocol. I betrayed the silence. He looked at Havel. I came here for a paycheck, Eli said. I thought I could just fix machines and ignore the people living next to them. I thought I could keep my head down. But you cannot ignore a fire when it is burning down your neighbor's house. He looked at Kayla, then back to the world. These aren't just neighbors. They are people, and you are killing them for profit. I helped build this system, and now I am tearing it down. The confession hung in the air, raw and undeniable. Havel's face went purple. Destroy the tower, Havel shrieked. All units, open fire on the spire, bring it down. Eli watched on the monitors as the corporate gunships, hovering above the city, began to charge their main cannons. The blue glow of the weapons lit up the night. We are going to die, Eli whispered, grabbing Kayla's hand. Kayla squeezed his fingers. She looked out the shattered window. Look, she said. From the rooftops, from the alleys, from the deep tunnels, they rose. It started as a rumble, then a roar. Hundreds of dragons shifted form. They burst from the shadows, their wings catching the neon light. They swarmed into the sky, a chaotic, beautiful cloud of scales and fire. They didn't attack the ships. They flew to the tower. In a maneuver that defied logic, the dragons linked wings. They formed a living, shifting wall of bronze, iron, and emerald scales around the glass spire. They hovered in layers, shielding the humans inside with their own bodies. The corporate ships fired. Beams of high-energy plasma streaked toward the tower. The dragons roared as one. They unleashed a wall of fire, a collective breath that met the incoming energy beams. The air exploded in a kaleidoscope of color, blue plasma crashing against orange and white dragon fire. The impact shook the tower, but the shield held. Eli watched in awe. He saw dragons taking hits, their scales deflecting the glancing blows, others swooping in to cover the injured. It was a display of absolute, selfless unity. On the ground, the stalemate broke. Human workers, seeing their director order the destruction of the city's landmark and the slaughter of the dragons, threw down their tools. They turned on the security forces. The barricades were overrun. not by war but by a mass of people refusing to comply. Then, a new ship appeared. It was a heavy cruiser, bearing the insignia of the Interplanetary Regulatory Commission, flanked by Varith's personal shuttle. A voice boomed over the citywide comms, overriding Havel's screaming orders. "This is Governor General Kalen. All Heliocore forces, stand down. Repeat, stand down. Your charter is suspended effective immediately." The corporate gunships hesitated. Then, one by one, their weapons powered down. They turned away. In the core room, Havel's image flickered. He slumped in his chair, realizing the off-world investors had just cut him loose. Kayla looked at Eli. The fire in her throat died down. "It is over," she whispered. Eli slumped against the console, his legs finally giving out. "We are still alive," he said, sounding surprised. Kayla smiled, a tired, beautiful expression. "Yes, tiny engineer. We are." The aftermath was a blur of lawyers, treaties, and reconstruction. Director Havel was arrested within the hour, dragged from his office by the very security guards he had ordered to fire on the city. The evidence from the shard was irrefutable. The scandal rocked the core worlds, forcing Heliocore's board to resign en masse. 3 months later, the dust had settled. A new governance charter was signed in the Great Hall of the Deep Tunnels. It established the Draconii clans as equal shareholders in all planetary resources. Strict environmental protections were enacted, monitored by a joint commission of human engineers and dragon earthsingers. But for Eli, the real victory was quieter. It was a cool evening on the roof of Obsidian Terrace. The building had been repaired. The scorch marks were gone, replaced by new murals celebrating the unity. Eli stood by the railing, holding 2 cups of spiced tea. He wore a new tunic, one made of local spider silk, heat-resistant and cut in the Draconii style. Kaela stood beside him. She was fully healed, her scales gleaming with health. She looked out over the city. The lava rivers still glowed, but the smog was gone. The air was clear. "Do you remember the first day?" Kaela asked, taking a cup. "You tried to fight the front door." "I stand by my assessment that the door was faulty," Eli said, grinning. Kaela laughed, that deep cello sound that still made his chest vibrate. "I thought you were a tourist," she admitted. "I thought you were just another passing storm, brief, noisy, and gone by morning." "And now?" Eli asked. Kaela turned to him. She rested her hip against the railing, looking him up and down with possessive warmth. "Now, you are a mountain, Eli. You are part of the landscape. You are something I can lean against when the wind gets strong." Eli stepped closer. He reached out and touched the scales on her neck, tracing the faint silvery lines where the burns from the lava lake had healed. "I like being a mountain," he said softly. "It is better than being a cog." He looked at her. "I learned something, Kaela. All my life, I ran from things that scared me. I ran from confrontation. I ran from my family. I ran to this planet to hide." He cupped her face. Her skin was hot, but it no longer burned him. His hands had grown tougher, or perhaps he had just learned how to hold the fire. "Running just chains you," he said. "Choosing where to stand. Choosing who to stand with. That is the only freedom that matters." Kaela's eyes softened, the vertical pupils widening. "You speak like a poet," she teased gently. "I speak like a man who is in love with a dragon," Eli replied. The humor faded from her face, replaced by a fierce, steady tenderness. "And the dragon loves the man," she whispered. She leaned down. The kiss was not frantic like the one in the hallway, nor desperate like the one in the cavern. It was deep, slow, and rooted. It was a vow made of breath and heat. It was a promise that their futures were knotted together, complex and unbreakable. Eli felt her wings partially unfurl, wrapping around them like a shield, shutting out the rest of the city. In that dark, warm space, he felt completely and utterly home. Ping. Eli pulled back, breathless. He fished his data pad from his pocket. "Really?" Kayla asked, an eyebrow raised. "You are checking your messages now?" "It might be important," Eli said, though he was smiling. He looked at the screen. It was a message from an encrypted frequency. Sender, Mira. Location, unknown. Looks like a beach. Message, just saw the news. The new charter looks boring, but the royalties from my expose on Havel are fantastic. I bought a boat. If you ever want to get away from the lava, come visit. Also, I demand a finder's fee for saving your relationship. You are welcome. Eli laughed aloud. Mira says hello, he said. Kayla snorted, a puff of smoke escaping her nose. That woman is chaos in human form. I like her. They turned back to the door to go inside. The hallway of the 4th floor was bustling. It was no longer segregated. A human family was moving into Unit 4C, carrying boxes while a Draconine neighbor held the door for them. The smell of cooking, spices, and roasting meat filled the air. As Eli and Kayla walked hand in hand down the corridor, a blur of motion shot past them. It was the little red-scaled dragon girl, flying low, but right behind her, sprinting on 2 legs, was a human boy with a cape tied around his neck, his arms spread like wings. "Wait for me," the boy yelled. "I can fly too." The dragon girl slowed down, hovering until he caught up. Then, she dropped to the ground and they ran together, laughing, toward the lobby. Eli watched them go. He squeezed Kayla's hand. Kayla looked at him, her golden eyes shining. Ready to go home. Tiny engineer? Eli smiled, looking at the woman who could burn cities but chose to build a life with him instead. I am already there. They walked through the door of apartment 4B, the sound of laughter echoing down the hall as the twin sons of Draconis III set on a world that was finally, truly, beginning.